This video is going to be a kind of a sequence to the previous one. If you did not watch my previous video on the Brompton G line, I recommend that you do so. A number of people recommended all kinds of different bikes that are bigger than 20 inches. I don't deny that some of those bicycles are interesting, but this channel is about compact, foldable, separable, small wheel bikes up to about 20 inches. I rarely review anything bigger than that. So here is the Austrian V bike, and in general I give most of the Velo bikes an honorable mention because the quality is good, but the looks of it is not a classic look. There is no suspension, and this way of attaching the steering column is not very secure. When it comes to the seat post, that is typically just tightened in the same way that you see the steering column attached here, and anybody who has had that knows that this kind of attachment slides slightly, so every few hours you have to make a little adjustment to it or something, and I don't want to do that on the front, and I consider it a bit dangerous. So I do have my arguments against what the company is doing. Nevertheless, they do have a whole line of cargo bikes, which I not only recommend but put them into #1 spot. They are currently making the best cargo bikes on the planet, and I will get back to that. But first, let's just look at this bike. The weight is just like the Brompton G. It's about 28 pounds, so it's not a very lightweight bicycle. It does not have much of any suspension, unless there is a bit of elastomer here, but that's not a lot. It does not have the third-party support of the Brompton. It's not a very popular brand in the US, so it does not have the incredible support that the Brompton enjoys because it has been on the market for a very long time. And by the way, this mudguard will do absolutely nothing because the spray is going to cover you all the way up to your neck. This is such a silly design detail that they put in there, especially for a bike that is for off-road use. They do have a front bag mount. It mounts directly onto the frame, just like with the Brompton and the Molten. I would say this is not my first choice. For a 28-29 pound vehicle, I would probably go for the Molten, or if I wanted something lighter, than the Birdie, and I will show you just how incredibly lightweight the Birdie is. So this one has everything. It has the hydraulic disc brakes. What you see here is an external derailleur, but in reality they make versions of this bike with belt drive. You can get all kinds of hub gear setups as well. So just to give you an idea of how many bikes they make really a ton of different bikes in all kinds of different categories. You can see that this one has a belt drive. They sell some with the hub gear as well. Here you can see the roll-off, and of course you could buy any of these and put on gravel tires. Since you have disc brakes, you don't have to worry about whether the brake is going to take it or not, and I think there is enough space. You can ask them, but I think there is enough space between the fork and the rear triangle to accommodate a 2-inch wide gravel tire, possibly something even bigger. They have some electrics and so on. I'm telling you, this is an honorable mention, not my first choice, but certainly it is a legitimate competitor, at least to the Brompton itself. It's not any heavier. It gives you way more options in terms of configurations, including the almighty roll-off and belt drive, which the Brompton is still not offering. Who knows why? Now, I want to say a few words about my most beloved Velo cargo bike. These bikes, what you see here, are Thai bahts. I am in Siam right now, so they are putting on Thai prices. This translates into the US as $7,000 to $8,000, and that is not unique because cargo bikes, especially with electric support, are now beginning to cost the price of a decent motorcycle. For $8,000, You could buy a wide-bodied Vespa or a 400cc BMW scooter. So if you buy one of these, it's because of the environment, because you can get on the bike path. It's just a different experience. And by the way, there is a double battery configuration as well. As you can see, you can have no derailleur hub gear setup as well. So I really cannot complain. These are excellent cargo bikes. Unfortunately, there is no suspension. That's my only gripe with it. And of course, the way the steering column is inserted with this collar, which I don't consider the most secure way of doing it. It may slide over time and then you have to adjust it. But it's a beautiful bike. It hands down is the most beautiful of the cargos out there. And if you look at some of the pictures, I mean, they have brushed titanium as well with the cargo. Cargo is also a competitor to the gravel bike because these are easily gravel tires. You have a much greater wheelbase, so it's a whole lot more comfortable, a lot less rocky and bumpy. But then if you have no suspension, it may not be a better experience than riding something like the Molten or the Birdie, which have excellent suspension. But still, for a cargo setup, I do more than recommend it. I totally endorse what Velo is doing. So I just wanted to say this about the Velo. Finally, about the Birdie, it's worth paying attention to the weight. That the G line from Brompton is around 30 pounds. And this is a crushing difference. It's only 22 pounds. Since the components are not vastly superior to that of the Brompton, the only way this can be explained is by a superior frame. And I owned the Birdie for 12 years, and it wasn't even the monocoque frame. They make great frames, and this highly intricate, narrow aluminum structure that folds into the front with a suspension is actually very sturdy. I was worried that maybe if I dropped the bike, something would happen. But the way the Birdie is screwed together is off the charts. So in 12 years, I don't think I replaced anything other than the brake pads. I had V brakes, and we did not have, mine was a 2006, so we did not have these kind of hydraulic brakes back then. Also, I do recommend an upgrade on the elastomer, both on the Brompton and the Birdie. So the Birdie is a very strong competitor. I would say it would be one of my top choices. If I needed something, especially for $2,200 or $2,500, depending upon where you're buying it from, I would go with the Birdie or with the Molten. The Molten I discussed in the previous video. I'm not going to spend time on it. I want to take a second look at the bike. Friday, I mistakenly announced that this was an aluminum frame. Clearly, you cannot build anything sturdy out of aluminum with this thickness. This is way too small for aluminum. This is a steel frame. It is foldable. Some people call it packable. Whatever you call it, there are joints in the frame. You can fold it, and because these bikes emphasize performance, same thing with the Velo, they don't fold as compact as the Brompton, and they are not intended for you to roll them around to become a shopping cart. On the other hand, if you're some kind of a rugged commuter, you could fold it up like this, put it into a shopping cart in a big supermarket, like I used to do with not only the Birdie, but I used to have an electric scooter. I would do the same thing. These things are too big to be allowed into the supermarket for you to push them around. There are some that allows it, but most of them do not. So, but you can fold them up and put them into the shopping cart, and you still have plenty of space for your groceries. At least that was my impression. These tires are also not, they are kind of halfway between a gravel tire size or a fat tire, 2.5 inches, which I would not describe as a fat tire, but it is a bit on the wider end for a gravel. So it's definitely very fat tire, Even though it does not have any suspension, the tires should give you some level of comfort. Some of these paint jobs are actually very nice. I'm not used to seeing this from Bike Friday, but this is a very nice paint job, and I like the light they attach to it as well. So this is definitely something to consider. Is it as good as the Birdie or the Molten? That's up to you to decide. I'm trying to be impartial here. I would probably choose those other two because of the suspension and because of much more compact fold and lighter weight with the Birdie, and because the Molten can be separated into two halves that weigh a mere 15 pounds. So if you want to pack it into something, talk about packable. It's much more packable than anything. Now, some people talked about the tire size and wheel size. One thing people forget is that the Brompton wheels or rims are not a proper 16-inch. They are 16 and a quarter. It's an unusual 349 millimeter size that hardly exists on the market. That's why it's so hard to find tires for this bike. All you have is really the Schwalbe and then maybe a couple of others. It's not a big selection, but proper 16-inch wheels actually do have a decent selection, and this is something Schwalbe is also supporting at a far larger scale than 349. So the proper 16-inch rim is 305 millimeters and significantly smaller than what's on the Brompton, which is a 16 and a quarter. The 20-inch rims have been very popular. They are pretty much the standard of small wheel bikes. They are used by the Molten. Bike Friday has been using them forever. So there are plenty of choices with that. But just in case you are wondering about what tire size you need to even survive, consider that the Honda Goldwing, one of the biggest bikes in the world that's mass produced, runs on 16-inch wheels in the rear and 18 in the front. Now, obviously, the tire width is going to be much bigger. You're not talking about a 2.5-inch tire, maybe more like 4 or 4.5 inches. But consider that these bikes were built to cruise at 100 miles an hour on the highway endlessly. They are gorgeous big bikes. I consider them the king of the road. They have these massive 6-cylinder flat engines put into the bottom of the bike. So everything is set up not so much to accelerate like a Ducati, but to cruise, and to cruise at high speeds, carrying humongous loads. And that is accomplished with a 16-inch rim in the rear, the same size or even smaller, because this is a proper 16, slightly smaller than what you got on your Brompton right now. And the front is 18, which is the size you have on the average Birdie bike. So that's all I wanted to say. I hope I corrected the mistakes that were made in the previous video, and I'll see you in the next one.
I'll be back.